So who are Paul and Aniko Smith, and why should you care? Well, we'd like to share with you our story, not for us, but for anyone that needs the inspiration to perhaps change where they're currently heading and to live a more inspired life. Dad was English, Mum was Irish. That's been useful in all sorts of ways. I've got the intelligence on one side and I've got the ability to talk on the other side. Is that true?
Yep, absolutely.
Dad was one of the brightest guys I've ever known. He spoke 7 languages, he was a historian. He gave me the real love of education, of educating myself. My mum, on the other hand, gave me the real love of educating other people. So, just to give you the dead basics, I was brought up in a Yorkshire pit village on a normal estate. Why do you sound like a Londoner, Paul? It's something I quite often get asked. Well, that's because I did my secondary schooling down in Hertfordshire. And these were very ordinary schools. They were, well, my secondary school was a comprehensive, it wasn't anything fancy. I did okay at school. And I suppose the one thing I should mention is when I was 14, I spent a year in hospital, which obviously most people don't, do they? And it's an absolute blessing in some ways, and some people say, oh, poor you. And it isn't poor you at all. I developed something called Crohn's disease, and I had multiple operations, and I think it really helped me to understand how brief life is. Because during that 14th year, I had 3 operations. Well, I had many operations, sorry. 3 of them were life-threatening. You know it's life-threatening. I was brought up as a Catholic, and if they think a Catholic's going to die, then they give them something called the last rites. So I had that at 14. And there were 2 more occasions when I was told to say goodbye to everyone. And I think that is one of the best gifts I've ever been given, because so many people think they're invincible or they're going to live forever. Well, I'm not, and I know I'm not. And my mortality has been shown to me. Because when people say that time's the most valuable asset, they then go and waste most of it scrolling on Facebook or answering phone calls to people they don't even know or whatever. So that takes me up to the age of 17, 18 when I left home.
I'm from Hungary. Both of my parents lived in Hungary, so all my childhood up until my, well, almost 30 years, the first 30 years was all in Hungary. Behind the Iron Curtains, as you would say it, which had its, at the time you don't think about it, but later on I realized the limitations of people just telling you what you should and shouldn't do and how you should behave and what's normal.
Sorry, and you mean in that context you're talking about the communist regime?
Yes. And it just...
The state?
Yeah, for example, although by that time when I got to university, the communist regime was finished, but my parents still stayed in the Communist Party because they knew that it could come useful for my application. They literally, although there wasn't officially that era anymore, they did check whose parents were doing what, and if they didn't like it, opportunities was literally taken away from you. But yeah, I brought up in a loving family with a sister of mine. I was very determined. It's an interesting thing because I believe my determination came, and I don't even know if I ever told you this story actually. My mum, strong, lovely woman, didn't wanted me. But I know it sounds more horrible than what it was. I don't remember what it was. It was just once a family meal when we were talking about, and I came very fast after my sister. Mm-hmm. So in that context, Mom was saying that it's kind of, I came earlier than I wasn't planned, but she did, I believe, said that I wasn't wanted, and that had, it had an impact on me. Purely because I wanted to prove myself. So, yeah, my sister being the first child, as every parent would do, I remember mom and dad doing the homework with her and doing stuff I was doing on my own. And eventually, I remember when I was quite good with maths, and I was helping my year older sister preparing for her exams. So I was determined just to prove myself. And interestingly, that story continued when I came to the UK. That was 1998, so 28 years old when I came to the UK. Because as a female, with some English, not necessarily the perfect one, I also felt again that I needed to prove myself. I remember when I was a bit later on, but literally by that time owning the house with you together and trying to refurbish it, and the guy was still not wanting to talk to me because what do you want, Lassie, or whatever he called me.
And Aniko's an accountant, and when it came to things like doing your accountancy degree, who passed out top of your class?
Yeah, I did. I put the effort in. I truly believe whatever you are doing, you're already putting the effort in, so might as well do it the best you can. Yeah. So I don't, it probably bothers me if somebody is doing a half-hearted job, because then don't do it, why bother? So yeah, I definitely, when I do something, all in.
We both did a first degree, engineer, accountant. We both did an MBA, a Masters in Business Administration. We both worked for big blue chip companies. And I think by any standards, we had a pretty decent career, didn't we?
Yes.
But for me, the whole follow the system. So what does the system say to you? It says, go to school, work hard, get exams, get a job. And then what? And then spend the rest of your life doing stuff that you probably most of us don't want to do, just so that we can get money. My dad, first in any side of the family, for any generation, whatever, went to university. But he didn't just go to university, he went to Oxford University. And because my dad went to Oxford University, I did something called the Oxbridge entrance exams. In terms of A-levels, people would normally need 3 A's or, A stars or whatever to get into Oxford. Because my dad went there, I got offered 2 D's and an E. I mean, I did well in the entrance exams, but so for me, that devalued the whole thing, and it actually made me sit down and think, what do I want to do? And what I decided I didn't want to do was go and compete with all these other clever people that were medical, this is going to sound terrible, and legal, because that's where all the best and the brightest minds go. So I actually looked at it the other way around. I said, well, if I'm going to end up doing a job that I probably don't want to do anyway, why don't I do something where I get paid as much money as possible and there's no competition? Which is kind of observing the masses and doing the opposite, in my defense, I think. So I decided to get into manufacturing. And I'm probably going to get a load of hate now from all the people in manufacturing that say, we're not silly. Well, no, I'm not saying that. But in my day, I'm 58 as I'm recording this, so I'm talking 40 years ago now. Manufacturing and being an engineer was pretty much on the bottom of the pile when it came to career choices. And therefore, when I went into that environment with a first degree and a master's degree, I was genuinely unusual. And by the time I was 23, I was a senior manager. I was responsible for 300 people. By the time I was 28, I was a general manager. Before I was 30, I was at director level. And in my mid-30s, I got promoted to be managing director of the company where we met, essentially. So that was my career up until the point that I met Aniko, but we met each other.
Yeah, I was working for the family business for a very short time, but there was a lady who felt that as a family member I'm trying to take her job, and I was like, I'm not interested in politics, so I've just moved on. And after that it was big blue chips, first in Hungary, then they offered the opportunity to come and work in their Central and Eastern European Centre in the UK. And I came for 2 years. It's an interesting one. I always said that I just want to do a good job, but family is much more important for me. So after 2 years, I'm going to go back, and every 2 years they started to promote me. So there was another 2 years and another 2 years, and then I met you. Because I always knew that whilst I do want to do the best, whatever I'm doing, jobs are just that, jobs. The family is everything. I am really, because I'm coming from a loving, supporting family, that was my idea of what life is all about, just create that same loving, supporting family. And it's interesting because I believe we have loads of commonalities in our background. There is one big difference. And I think for me, that's what Touchstone is all about, and that part is coming from you. Is, as I said, I had an amazing, loving upbringing, good educations, and very hardworking mentality. The one thing, as a Hungarian and Austro-Hungarian Empire and all the rest of it, I'm sure it's part of it, but thinking for yourself and going outside of the system, that's not part of my upbringing. It was, as I told you, mom and dad stayed in the Communist Party so that I'm not getting a negative impact. So they would not want to step 1 foot outside of the expected. So for me, that was the biggest challenge. And I think that's my biggest love for what we created, of making people think for themselves, appreciate and understand what the system is offering, but do what's best for you and your family so that you can leave a legacy and you can live the life what some of you might not even dream at this moment in time. That is special, and that part is coming from you.
Well, yes, that part does, but there's many other fantastic bits that come from you. I've always thought that, or my version of that since I was very, very young, is the limitation, the only limitation that any of us has is what we decide to do. And I've always believed that. I've always believed that deciding what you're going to do is the hard part, then doing it is the easy part. Because you sit there as an individual in this country, in this world, in this universe. You could decide to be a diesel mechanic, or you could decide to be an astronaut. These are pretty difficult choices. You know, what is it you want to do in life? And what I've never wanted to do is the same as everybody else. I wanted to go to university, I wanted to be an engineer. So I asked myself, I believe, some pretty good questions. And you often say, don't you, that the quality of our lives is determined by the quality of the questions that we ask.
Yes, that's for sure.
So I wanted to go to university, but I knew my parents couldn't afford to send me, and Mrs. Thatcher had just stopped all the grants. So the question I asked myself was, how can I go to university for nothing? And I managed to get Ford's to sponsor me to do my first degree. So that meant I got £1,000 per term while I was studying. And then for 6 months, so that was 2 terms, then 6 months of the year, I was actually working for Ford's on shift work, and I was doing, you know, quite long hours. I was doing night shifts, day shifts, so I got paid quite a lot of money. But I didn't want to spend any of it because I wanted to save up and buy a house or a flat. And so the next question I asked myself is, how can I live for nothing? And I've told you this before, haven't I? And most people wouldn't even think to ask themselves the question, how can I live for nothing? But that's what I did. So I got a job, an extra job, as well as being a student and working for Ford's and whatever. And I would work 20 hours a week, cleaning out the swimming pool or pruning the roses. So they gave me free accommodation, they fed me, I had no utility bills, no council tax, nothing like that. So 100% of what I earned, I kept, and therefore I was almost 18, I was 17, and I bought a £9,000 flat in London, moved in, started doing it up, and 18 months later, I sold it for £32,000, and that's really where I got started in property. So I probably did more property than you, because we both did property as we worked, didn't we?
Yeah, but for me mostly it was just home.
Yeah.
So I'm very focused on that. But it's an interesting thing, all what you are saying in terms of everybody will have their own story, and they will have things which feel at the time as hard, not fair, as the children would sometimes say, or sometimes where you feel that you are kind of not where you want to be. But the question never that, because we all have that as part of our life story, is what are you going to do about it? How do you take that life event and turn it to your advantage is the question for me. Because as I said, kind of jokingly, but my mom, when she said that she didn't want it, I could have just felt for the rest of my life disadvantaged or not wanted, or somebody who is not worthy of much. But I choose to prove myself. You decided that you will want to live the life you want, and how can you live without paying for it? So just always watch of what's happening to you and how you react to it, because that reaction will determine of which way your life is going.
And Aniko is a fantastic example of this. None of us can control what the world does to us. All that we can control is how we react to that. It's what we do to the world. So I don't know if you know anybody in your life that doesn't seem to work very much. I mean, we work 2 days a week and we have 5 days a week off, which is the opposite to most people. And people started noticing that, and we would take a holiday for a month or whatever, and people said, well, how are you doing that? So in 2014, we decided to found Touchstone Education, and so rather than just doing the thing, we started training other people to do the thing.
And I tell you why it was very important for me, because from the very beginning, when I met with Paul, he always wanted to change people's life. He had clarity. I wasn't that type of person. It took me a while to figure out what was my big aim, big purpose. But Paul was very clear. He wanted to change people's life. And for him, that at the time meant to go into politics. So he always told me that he just wants to earn enough money where he can be independent. So he doesn't need to be and follow a party politics, but he can say what he truly believes will change people's life, because politicians make a big impact on people's life. So when people started to ask us, and Paul got interested and wanted to share of how we became successful through property, I really loved it, because finally Paul find a different way of helping people. Because quite often people are saying that, if you are so wealthy, why are you still teaching? That's what Paul is all about. He wants, from a very early age, or wanted to change people's life, and that's what Touchstone is. And there is not too many things more powerful and impactful than when our students, people who we helped, each and every one of you are doing your own journey and achieving your things, but obviously we might be a tiny part of it. And when people come back and tell us that, thank you because I do this or I achieved that, that is very rewarding. More probably the giving birth was for me the only one thing which was more rewarding than helping people with their life journey.
Educating people is a little bit less painful than giving birth.
Yeah.
But to be fair. So yeah, just like Aniko said, from a personal perspective, there's nothing gives me greater satisfaction. Yes, sometimes people would write us a postcard or they'll send us a message. But even if they don't do that, even if we just see them on social media and they've just flown their entire family to the Grand Canyon, I mean like 10 people or something, and they're saying it's because of property, then that's fantastic. I mean, what else could you possibly want in the world? And well, I genuinely believe that if you offer a service that's of significance, you'll be hugely rewarded. And so the service that we offer through Touchstone Education is to enable everyday people like me and Aniko. I mean, we come from very humble backgrounds, as you will have learned by now, and starting with no money. Now, of course, yes, it's easier if you've got some money and you've got a job and everything. But to take that raw material, which is the aspiration, the talent, the determination, the inspiration to want to be and do more, I don't think there's anything else on the planet that I could be doing that's more rewarding for me. And that, together with the property journey, together with all the other companies, I think we own 17 companies now, is what allowed us to move to Monaco a couple of years ago. And I don't know what you want to do with your life. And you might have the perfect existence. You might be supremely happy. On the other hand, you might not be happy. You might be tired all the time. You might be working too hard, and you might not have enough money. We can help you with those things. If your life is already perfect, it's pretty difficult for us to do anything, isn't it? But most people's life isn't perfect. So wherever your journey takes you, I would like to wish you all the very best on that journey. And if you believe that Touchstone Education, or specifically Aniko and myself, can be any part of your journey, we'd love to help.